This one is the depressing one. It's the depressing one because not only does Module 1 come back, but it's the depressing one because it's the one that talks about death. We talk about the accident rate and we talk about death. So, they give you all the car crash fatalities and then they give you the injuries for the US data and then they give you the global data. They want to know about how often, once every minute or seconds on average, is a person killed in a car crash in the United States. So, when we have the United States data, it has car crash fatalities, 42,000. Per year. They want us to do it every minute or every second. About how often every minute or seconds on average is a person killed in a car crash in the US. How often is a person injured in a car crash? So we have 42,000 per year. We want to know per day, per hour, or per second, or per minute. So we want to know the one that's more feasible, I guess, to understand. So let's start by changing it to minutes and see, is it easier to talk about minutes or to talk about seconds? So we know that a year has 365 days. Told you it would come back. And that one day has 24 hours. And that 1 hour has 60 minutes. And when you do that, you get really low numbers. So let's back that up a bit. I know it must be really low because when I did it in hours, we got a better number. So if we do it by hours, we find out that we end up with 4.79452 deaths per hour. So that's a reasonable number. If we were to go it and divide by 60, that would be an unreasonable number. It's not a whole number. It's not more than one, so it kind of gets a little fuzzy. When we talk about being killed in a car crash for global, car crash fatalities are 1.3 million. 3 million means I add the 5 zeros per year. $365 days. 1 day is 24 hours. This is a much larger number, so we can go ahead and break down 1 hour is 60 minutes. And when we do that, we end up with 2.5 deaths per minute. The next little section, they want us to answer the following questions. Express the 1995 and 2020 fatality rates in deaths per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So first we're talking about deaths, which are fatalities, per 100 million vehicle miles traveled. So we got to look at the things that they're asking us for. So we're starting out, we'll do 1995 over here, and we'll do 2020 over here. So for 1995, we're going to look at the deaths for 1995. That's 41,817 over. They want vehicle miles traveled. Well, the vehicle miles that they told us were 2.4, but that's not in 100 million. That's in trillions. So I have to write it as trillions. So 2.4 is 2,400. That's trillion, billion. Trillion is 12. So I'm supposed to have 12 places. That looks like that. But they wanted it in 100 millions. So I need to multiply by my 100 million. Remember we had this conversation about canceling out? So when things are multiplied and something's on top and something's on bottom, you can cancel out zeros. That's what I'm going to do, is cancel out my zeros. So I've got these 3 zeros here, I cancel out with those 3 zeros there. 3 zeros here, cancels out with those 3 zeros there. If I didn't have this, I would be an upset person. So 2 zeros here, cancels out with those 2 zeros there. Now I have a 1 here, so I don't have to worry about any kind of fancy multiplication. All I have is this 41817 over now the 24000, because that's what's left that didn't get canceled out. Stick that into my calculator and I get 1.74, and I can write 100 million behind it. Deaths per 100 million. Underneath the 2020, we would have what they had for 2020. So that's the 42,000 over the 2,800. And then times the 100 million. The zeros cancel out. Those 2 cancel out with those 2. Do the stuff and you end up with 1.5 per 100 million. Deaths per 100 million. You have to make sure that you give it to them in what they're asking you for. Express the 1995 and 2020 rates in deaths per 100,000 population. So now we're going to be using the U.S. population on the bottom. We're still talking about traffic fatalities, so I still have my 41817 on top, but now I have my population on the bottom. So it's the 263, because we're talking about 1995, and it's in the millions, so that's 000,000 times, they want it 100,000. So my zeros can cancel out, 5 of them can. And that gives me 15.9 deaths per 100,000. Over here I have my 42,000 over my 330 million times my 100,000. Cancel out my 5 zeros. equals my 12.72 repeating per 100,000. Do you have to write it repeating? No, I just did. You can leave it as 0.72 if you want. The next one they wanted in deaths per 100,000 licensed drivers. So that's this one. But it was written in millions. So you're going to have to write it as millions and change it to times 100,000 per licensed drivers. So I start out with my 41817. Then my licensed drivers is 177. It was millions. So I write that down. And then they want it per 100,000. So I can cancel out my zeros. Do my math. And get 23.6 per 100,000. And over here I have my 42,000 over my 232 million times my 100,000 equals 18.1 per 100,000. Probably should pause and do the next one and the next thing, but I'm not going to because it's a short one. So for example 3, it's kind of the same thing, but not quite. They want the exact same stuff, and I'm going to tell you that here, when they ask for it, they ask in the same unit that it's given in. Compute the accident rate per million hours flown. By this measure, as the U.S. travel hours became safer. So they want it per million hours flown, and they give it in millions. Since they want it per million hours flown, and they give it in million hours flown, then we don't have to worry about multiplying it by a different number. And because of that, it makes your calculations a whole lot simpler. So it says compute the accident rate, so that's accidents. We're doing it in 2005. So my accidents were 34 over, don't worry about the B's and the C's. My accidents were 34. Compute the accident rate per hours flown, per, that's where my line goes, per million hours flown. So that's 18.7. I don't have to write it as millions or anything. I don't have to do all that stuff because it's already in the millions. I'm not doing that because I'm not multiplying it by something else. When they give it to you in what they're asking it from, then you're fine. You don't have to write it out on the bottom. You don't have to fix it on the side. Everything is taken care of and everything will come out fine. It's so much easier this way. So I do the 34 divided by the 18.7, and we get 1.8 per million hours flown. Then for 2019, this was for 2005. For 2019 over here, we have the 36 over hours flown, which was 19.8. And we end up with 1.8 exactly. Technically, it was 1.81. million hours flown. And they want to know, has it become any safer? And the answer is no. It has not become safer. Not at all. If anything, it's just a smidge worse. Then they want you to compute the accident rate per billion miles flown. So here the miles flown is already in the billions, so we don't have to worry about any travesty. There is no big numbers on the bottom. There is nothing that we have to multiply by beside it. None of that. So we have 2005, we've got the 34 over. The billion miles flown was 7.8. We compute that, we get 4.36 billion miles flown. And then for 2019, we have the 36 over the 8.7, and we get 4.13 billion miles flown. And that's it. And by this measure, has travel become safer? Yes, it has, because our number went down. So we're good. And that's it. That's the end of the module. That's the end of everything. Make sure you do the project. Don't forget to do the project. Okay. Bye.